October 6th, welcome everyone to Norfolk Public School Board's October 6, 2021 work session. We're going to start off by, so I just called to order, and we're going to start off by a roll call. So Ms. Tanner, please call the roll.
Basine? Here. Campson?
Here.
Clanton?
Present.
Gabriel?
Present.
Jordan? Smith? Here. Martin?
Here. All right. So now we're going to go into our closed executive session. So,
Madam
Ms.
Chair, I move that we move into executive closed session.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Dr. Gabriel seconded. So go ahead and please call the roll.
Move that
Oh,
members,
obviously read the motion and then call the roll.
move that the members of the school board go into a closed session for the purposes which are set out in subsection A of section 2.2-3711 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as amended for consultation with legal counsel and briefing by staff members concerning actual or probable litigation or specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by counselor pursuant to subsection 7 and 8 of the Act. The subjects of this session are the board's contract with the Council of Great City Schools for the provision of training to members of the board, the legal requirements governing the imposition of COVID-19 vaccination mandates by school boards in Virginia, and a proposed resolution regarding COVID-19 and Norfolk Public Schools employees before the board this date. Basine?
Okay. Regarding,
Yes, I'm going to be talking to the board.
I wasn't sure if you were talking about one topic or both, but yes, go ahead. Anyone else? Okay. You want to do your vote? Okay.
Okay, aye.
Aye.
Okay. Campson?
Aye.
Clanton?
Aye.
Gabriel?
Aye.
Jordan?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye. Okay, thank you. We'll re-adjourn over in the conference room and start the work session when we get back.
Madam Chair, I move to exit closed session.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Gabriel. Ms. Tanner, can you please read the resolution and
Yes.
call the roll?
A resolution certifying an executive meeting of the School Board of the City of Norfolk in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, whereas the School Board of the City of Norfolk has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the School Board of the City of Norfolk that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore it be resolved that the School Board of the City of Norfolk hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, that only public business matters were lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the executive meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the executive meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the School Board of the City of Norfolk. Basine?
Aye.
Campson?
Aye.
Clanton?
Aye.
Gabriel?
Aye.
Jordan?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
And Martin?
Aye. Okay, thank you. Without opposition, I'd like to amend the agenda and move item. I'm not clear. Do I go off the items online or the one?
It's already been switched. So,
Okay.
the 5.0
So we're okay. That's why I'm having trouble
back
here.
to school update.
So, okay, it's already been. So I'm moving 5.01 to 5.05.
5. Yes.
And the title of that is COVID-19 vaccinations.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Thank you. Here we go. All right. So first on our agenda, 5.01, we have our back to school update. Dr. Pohl, welcome.
Thank you.
Please proceed whenever you're ready.
Ma'am. All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Dr. Martin, Vice Chair, Mr. Clanton, members of the board, and Dr. Birdsong. I'm here to present updates from the opening of the school. This presentation will focus on enrollment and attendance data from September, the NPS Health Mitigation Plan, Virtual Scholars Academy information, transportation and meal services updates, and information pertaining to the ESSER 3 ARP spending plan. Although this is not the official enrollment report, excuse me, the data was pulled from Synergy on September 30th, 2021. The in-person enrollment is 27,764 students, with 463 additional students enrolled in VSA and 167 more students in Virtual Virginia. As of the end of September, the in-person attendance rate was 92.9%, the VSA rate is 92.4%, and the Virtual Virginia rate is 96%. Principals are continuing their efforts to locate no-shows through phone calls, home visits, checking social media, reaching out to students' known last job sites, and any other way they can think of to get students who have not been attending to re-enroll. Graduation coaches at the high schools have used their dropout lists and are actively searching for and re-enrolling students. Open Campus is also supporting this effort by offering options for online learning in cases where students have jobs or other reasons for not attending where this platform would be appropriate. Schools are also being creative with scheduling to the extent possible to provide students and families with scheduling options in extenuating circumstances. The attendance technicians assist with locating and contacting no-show students. They're also implementing our regulatory truancy procedures as the division's attendance officers. Some of the actions taken by attendance technicians to date are working closely with a student data specialist to find missing students by checking Synergy to see if they've been enrolled in another school or have moved out of the Norfolk area, made phone calls and follow-up calls to parents and guardians to inquire about missing students, visited homes, followed up on tips passed down to staff and students, worked with other staff who have social media connections to parents missing students, and calling transportation for parents with bus concerns and working with administration to call parents that need further assistance. Additionally, the schools are following regulations JEDR, which requires a reasonable effort to be made to notify parents and guardians of their child's absences. Ensuring NPS students are safe in schools requires an up-to-date health mitigation plan. Decisions related to many issues associated with the health mitigation plan are regularly discussed with the Norfolk Department of Public Health. Topics that are collaborated on include contact tracing, screening, testing, vaccine events, immunizations, and outbreaks. The division is following the State Health Commission's requirement for students and staff members to wear face coverings in school buildings. The division has also been working with the City Attorney's Office to develop the requirements and documentation associated with requesting a mask exemption. Masking exemptions can be applied for because of a significant medical concern or a sincerely held religious belief. Looking to the state for guidance on reporting and staying open, the division embraces the following. Students benefit from in-person learning. Safely returning to and maintaining an in-person instruction during the 21-22 school year is a priority. Providing educational opportunities for students is what will drive our actions. The division will strive to create a safe in-person educational environment and will try to include extracurriculars and athletics when it's safe and reasonable. The division will implement a layered approach to maintaining healthy school environments with multiple prevention strategies, considering disease and vaccination trends, and also understanding the socioeconomic factors, literacy barriers, and other educational needs in the community when developing plans. NPS will follow existing policies and practices in place that address student attendance and truancy, and parents will be contacted to inquire about absences, and documentation to support absences will be logged. Absences that are related to COVID-19 infection will be shared with the representatives from Norfolk Public Health Department when appropriate, and student illness rates and types of symptoms will be monitored. Again, the division is using CDC guidance to contact trace those that are positive or exposed, quarantine and isolate those that meet the criteria, and bring students and staff members back from quarantine once they have met the requirements to return. NPS is following layered mitigation strategies to contain and reduce infection and transmission of the COVID-19 virus. Strategies include the promotion of vaccines, consistent and correct use of masks, social distancing, monitoring building ventilation, hand washing, and respiratory etiquette, consistent cleaning of buildings, reminding students and staff to stay home when sick, COVID testing when appropriate, and contact tracing. In addition, NPS is currently partnering with the Virginia Department of Health to develop a screening testing program for the division. NPS has a full supply of masks and PPE supplies in schools, an additional supply in the warehouse, and a backup supply in the Coronado building. Masks are being provided to any employee or student who needs one. Additionally, face shields have been provided to all staff, as well as gowns to teachers and staff who must have close contact with students. District communication has included hanging posters that promote mitigation strategies in school buildings, posting information on the NPS website, and using social media to share information with stakeholders. The mitigation plan has also been shared with building leaders at the Summer Leadership Institute and with teachers during school's pre-service week. There is also continuous training and updates with school nurses. As COVID cases arise, there may be a need for staff or students to quarantine. Who is required to quarantine? Those that have tested positive for COVID-19 and those that have been determined to have been significantly exposed to another person that is positive for COVID-19 are required to quarantine. The process of contact tracing determines what the level of risk of transmission between individuals and examines if mitigation strategies were followed. Who is not required to quarantine? Those that have tested positive for COVID-19 infection in the last 90 days that have no symptoms are not required to quarantine. Those that have been fully vaccinated and have no symptoms are not required to quarantine. The two groups described do not have to quarantine, but should be especially careful about following mitigation strategies. They should socially distance, wear their mask appropriately, and wash their hands regularly. Previously positive individuals and those that have been fully vaccinated should test 3 days after a significant exposure to ensure they have not developed a breakthrough infection. Significant exposure refers to someone that has had close contact with a person who is positive for COVID-19 while they were contagious. Significant exposure takes the following into consideration: the distance, 3 to 6 feet for students and 6 feet for adults; the time, 15 minutes or more cumulative over a 24-hour period; having exposure to respiratory secretions such as being coughed or sneezed on, or sharing a drinking glass or utensils; and mask usage. While wearing a mask is a primary mitigation strategy, it must be well-fitting. Not wearing a mask, especially in close distance or for an extended period of time, is a significant concern. Mitigation efforts against COVID-19 transmission include the monitoring of data associated with transmission. The CDC provides a variety of metrics that informs the public about local disease parameters. The data describes conditions at the city level, new cases per 100,000 people over the last 7 days, and the percent of positive tests over the last 7 days are two primary metrics that are posted on the NPS website. Transmission indicators are color-coded by intensity level, which includes low, which is blue, moderate, yellow, substantial, orange, and high, red. Over the past months, level have been in the red for both indicators. The NPS website also graphs the two metrics, which illustrates the peaks and valleys over time associated with disease transmission. In addition, the number of positive cases that are contact traced in school buildings are displayed on the website, and it typically takes 2 days from the initial reporting of the case to the completion of contact tracing and posting on the website. Additionally, in the past few weeks, an update was downloaded to this portion of the site to make it more accessible on mobile devices. The division's continuity of learning plan for quarantine students has been posted and sent to principals in the event there are quarantined students. This plan provides guidance for teachers with students who must stay home due to having COVID-19 symptoms or who must stay home due to being quarantined to prevent the spread of COVID-19. As always, the focus should be on the health of our students and staff. If a student has symptoms and does not feel well enough to work, the absences will be excused once documentation is provided. Likewise, work can be completed for full credit after returning to class. If the student feels well enough to work, the student may also do work while in quarantine, and the student will not be counted as absent. If less than half the class is in quarantine, work will be provided to students through Canvas, our learning management system, for the duration of the student's quarantine period. The student's teacher will stay in communication with each student and or parent to provide the needed instruction and learning supports. However, the lessons will be asynchronous. In the event half or more of the class is placed in quarantine, the teacher will provide live instruction concurrently to in-person students and virtual instruction through Zoom for students in quarantine. Teachers will be paid an additional stipend for days that they have to teach concurrently. Students will follow their daily schedule and log into class through Zoom link provided within Canvas, and students are expected to be logged in during the teacher-led instruction time with their cameras on and may log off during independent times. Under extenuating circumstances, parents or guardians may contact the teacher in situations where the student's camera may have to be turned off. If an entire class is placed in quarantine, the teacher will provide live online instruction during normal class times. And additional supports during the period of quarantine, students will have access to live tutoring sessions via Zoom, which are beyond any live instructional student support provided by the teacher or designee. For student engaged learning to occur, there must be daily meaningful interactions between the student and the teacher while quarantined. These interactions may include two-way engagement between the student and the staff member, engagement in synchronous or real-time instruction, submission of work required for asynchronous instruction, attendance during a synchronous real-time lesson, communication via email or Zoom conference, etc. When less than half the students in a class are quarantined, attendance will be taken based on meaningful interactions. And when more than half the class is in quarantine, attendance will be taken based on attending the in-person class or the online class. And of course, for a fully virtual class, the students have to show up online for attendance to be taken. If the entire class is in quarantine, attendance will be required on the video feed. For students who are learning in a fully virtual environment, there are online options. The Virtual Scholars Academy was originally set up for 4th to 12th grade students with an application-based entry. The requirements were for students to have been successful during the virtual environment the previous year. Although VSA was never set up to exempt students with health safety concerns, parents with those concerns were able to sign up their students before June 14th, 2021. In August, NPS also enrolled 17 students into Virtual Virginia from grades K through 3 that showed documented health safety concerns. Slide ahead up here. I do apologize for that. All right. During the first month of school, to accommodate the needs of the community, 12 elementary classes were able to be collapsed to create K-5 synchronous VSA classes and enroll an additional 145 students into VSA from the wait list. Most of these students were not coming to school due to health safety concerns and are now enrolled online. Currently, secondary classes for VSA are at capacity due to staffing constraints, and acceptance has been limited to a few students that have documented health safety concerns. There are several class formats for our virtual students. Students in K through 5 are fully live or synchronous in both the newly created VSA program and the Virtual Virginia classes. There are 12 synchronous VSA classes for grades K through 5 and 9 classes in Virtual Virginia. Secondary students in VSA either have synchronous or asynchronous classes depending on the class and the student learning request. Additionally, any Virtual Virginia class for secondary students is asynchronous. Currently, there are 32 synchronous VSA classes and 19 asynchronous classes, and we have 19 synchronous classes hosted by Edmentum, which is within VSA, and 4 asynchronous classes through Virtual Virginia for middle school students. For high school students, there are 32 synchronous and 10 asynchronous VSA courses, 18 synchronous courses hosted through Edmentum, and students are in a total of 50 different asynchronous Virtual Virginia courses. In an effort to improve student engagement during online learning this year, students are being requested to turn on their cameras for any online learning. However, as stated earlier, if there's a reasonable request from the parent or guardian, the camera may be turned off for a period of time. And there are currently 370 students as of last week on the 6 through 12 wait list for online learning. To accommodate this request, there would need to be approximately 14 full-time teachers or about 75 classes to be offered by paying current teachers an extra box supplement. All teachers have been contacted and asked to fill these openings, and no remaining teachers are able or willing to take on the added responsibility. Currently, NPS is advertising for virtual openings to assist with this need. If a student is on the waiting list, the students have been requested to attend in-person classes until an opening occurs in VSA. And if a student does not come to classes, they must be enrolled in an online school or elsewhere or homeschooled. If they are dropped from the NPS enrollment, they will still be contacted if there's an opening for the student in VSA. Currently, the Department of Transportation is doing everything possible to safely transport NPS students with a limited staff of 127 drivers. It is commendable on what the 127 drivers has accomplished to transport our students daily, in addition to mechanics and dispatch personnel with CDLs who have also stepped up to assist where needed. The elementary school ridership is at about 40% with an average daily ridership of 4,346 students. middle schools at 35% with 3,802 students on average, and high schools at 25% with an average of about 2,706 students. Everyone is required to wear a mask on the bus, and students from the same household are seated together. Also, bus windows are open to provide fresh air, and sanitizing is performed between each bus run with high contact areas sanitized regularly. And at the end of the day, each bus is fully sanitized. In an effort to recruit bus drivers, flyers were updated and sent out to the community publicizing job fairs that were scheduled. Radio stations announced on several occasions amplifying information about upcoming job fairs. Targeted Facebook ads were conducted. Pop-up job fairs were conducted at MacArthur Center Mall for bus drivers as well. And school marquees were made available to post the need for transportation strategically across the communities. And additionally, incentives were publicized to recruit bus drivers as well. As NPS did last year, meals for virtual learners are available free of charge at the end of each instructional day at the 5 high schools and at Southside STEM Academy. Meals may be picked up by students or their parents and will include a hot meal plus a cold breakfast and lunch for the next day. Breakfast and lunch for in-person learners at the 50 schools are picked up by the students at the scheduled time. At this time, staffing shortages have required a reduction in the number of choices available, and the supply chain issues such as product shortages and delays necessitate frequent menu changes. However, USDA meal pattern requirements continue to be satisfied. School nutrition staff continue to wear PPE during meal service, and all meal components will be served by school nutrition personnel who are trained to ensure that students select a reimbursable meal. They're responsible for meal count. The school nutrition staff is also responsible for meal counts as the students are no longer touching keypads. And additionally, all meals are served in a covered container until further notice. And schools are encouraged to open the windows in the cafeteria during food service times to increase fresh air intake. And for further safety, sanitizing stations have been installed in each cafeteria. And students are required to sanitize their hands before entering the service lines. And school nutrition staff are required to sanitize the cafeteria tables immediately after each lunch shift or after each meal shift, allowing drying time in between each group of students. Moving on to the ARP ESSER 3 plan. In developing this plan, Norfolk Public Schools conducted consultation through meetings with internal stakeholders during April, May, and June that included division-level leadership representing curriculum instruction, school leadership, budget and finance, school facilities, Title I, homeless, English learners, and special education, as well as school-level leadership, teachers, and specialists to develop an initial plan for review. Following the initial plan, stakeholder meetings were held in June with principals, teachers, building level and division level specialists, as well as content coordinators. Following these meetings, participants were asked to share the information with additional stakeholders and to respond with additional ideas to be included in the application. To gain further insight into the needs of the community, in July, an email was sent with a survey link to all parents and employees, as well as posted on social media outlets for input from anyone within the community. This survey was also sent directly to professional organizational representatives and school board advisory committee chairs to ensure they had an opportunity to submit input. The feedback from stakeholder meetings and surveys was included in the spending plan. The spending plan was then posted by August 1st with another opportunity for feedback prior to the application being submitted. At the close of the survey window, there were 2,856 responses with a representation of 1,701 or 59.6% that were parents or guardians, 13 or 0.5% that were students, 737 or 25.8% that were teachers, 67 or 2.4% that were school administrators, 264 or 9.2% school support staff, and 47 or 1.7% that were central office staff, and 27 or 1% that were community members. Again, this survey was also sent directly to professional organizational representatives and school board advisory committees to ensure for opportunity for input. The 2,856 respondents represented the following groups, and please note that respondents could have chosen more than one option. So 736 or 25.9% represented English language learners. Homelessness was 577 respondents. Foster care was 447. Migrant students was 271 or 9.5%. Incarcerated was 265. Special education was 1,167 or 41%. Disability with or without a 504 was 34.7% or 988 respondents. And 1,231 respondents said had none of the above, which they could have written in an option, and some of those write-ins were such as gifted, representing low-income, adult education, or military, just to name a few. Survey respondents were asked to choose 5 areas where they wanted to see the funding spent. The top area was to provide social, emotional, and wellness supports to students and staff. Next was access to high-quality instructional materials, followed by additional learning time, such as before and after-school tutoring to accelerate learning for students. All respondents were also provided a written response opportunity related to how they wanted to see the funds spent. There were a total of 1,159 responses, with 802 comments directly related to the topic, 142 were no comment or NA, and 298 that were not relevant to the survey, such as students need to be back in school full-time or build new schools. The breakdown of who responded with a comment is listed in the chart at the bottom of the slide, with the highest rates coming from parents and guardians with 53.6% of the comments, and the next being teachers with 31.8% of the comments. All comments were reviewed and categorized based on commonalities. The highest comment was for bonus or raises for teachers and staff. Next was for additional tutoring opportunities, then to add staffing, then technology upgrades, then learning and assessment materials and software, and then HVAC upgrades and air quality. The lowest comments were around air quality testing, assistance for employees with health concerns, bottle refilling stations, a mobile resource bus, thermometer testing at the door, and year-round schooling. Overall, when considering all 802 relevant comments, 71.8% of the requests within the comments were included in the final spending plan. If you remove the bonus or raise item, it moves it up to 87.4% of the suggested items within the comments were included in the final spending plan. There were 3 required areas for the spending plan, which were prevention and mitigation strategies that totaled just over $66 million, or 58.5% of the funds. To address unfinished learning, which totaled just under $26 million, or 22.8% of the funds. And then other uses, which totaled just over $21 million, or 18.7% of the funds. The prevention and mitigation strategies focused on ventilation system upgrades for equipment, labor, and installation, PPE equipment and related supplies, supplies and consumable materials for pre-K-12 students to avoid sharing, and building repairs that may be needed to reduce the risk of virus transmission. This year, NPS was able to purchase school supplies for students to ensure that every student had what they needed to start the school year. To address unfinished learning, the spending was focused on resource materials and software, mathematics manipulatives, book bundles to support early learning, resource materials for English learners, resource materials for students with disabilities, funding for summer school through the summer of 2024, face-to-face online and in-person tutoring funding, early literacy tutoring support, middle school math and reading tutoring support, all of these topics to include items to assist teachers, not to replace teachers in the classroom. And finally, the funding for other supports includes supports for SEL materials, professional development and curricular materials, technology upgrades, curriculum alignment and assessment development, upgrades to enhance data reporting, support for before and after school clubs to support SEL needs, internet access for students at home, ebook platforms for students, and replacement library books and professional development funds. The ESSER 3 ARP application was due by September 1st, 2021. NPS submitted the application on August 30th, 2021. The VDOE approved the application on September 2nd, and as a part of the application process, a safe return to in-person instruction plan had to be posted by June 1st of 2021, and the plan was posted on May 31st, and it must be reviewed every 6 months. Finally, the spending plan had to be posted by August 1st, and it must be also reviewed every 6 months with the opportunity for amendments to the grant application. The reviews of both plans are to include opportunity for stakeholder input. This concludes the opening of school update, and at this time I have many colleagues with me, and we are prepared to answer questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pohl. I appreciate the detailed description of the survey. I think that's really helpful.
Absolutely.
Any questions? Ms. Smith, Ms. Basine, and then Mr. Jordan.
Thank you. Just a quick initial question. The enrollment of 28.4 thousand, how does that compare to the previous year?
The previous year's enrollment. Hang on just one second. I have that. I do apologize for flipping through. So the 1920 or 2021 school year, we had 27,969. In 1920, we had 29,851. In 1819, we had 30,105.
Did we increase from last year? Is that what I heard?
I think with you, when you add the numbers up, we're right there or just above the number from last year.
Okay.
And I think some of that is because we are in person and we're finding students and bringing them back to school. All the list of the work that the schools are doing, we're getting more enrollees.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I'm sorry, yes, so, Ms. Basine?
I want to thank Dr. Birdsong and her team for this presentation. I have a couple of questions, or a few questions, and I'll try to break it up by some of the sections. But starting with the health mitigation plan, so we've communicated that plan out, to all of our stakeholders, so that everyone's on the same page about what the protocols and things are, right?
Correct.
So,
Mhm.
yeah, okay.
And to your point, so initially the plan was and when we began getting questions around that, I went to the website to look for it myself, and that's when I had a conversation with Mrs. Washington, and she suggested that we put it in a more prominent location. So that's why it was changed from student wellness to like the front page, I think. Is that where you put it, Mrs. Washington? Yes. So that parents could access it very easily. So
Thank you.
Appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, thank you for doing that, and I think that will be really helpful for all stakeholders involved. Next, so around VSA and the online learning. So are we fully staffed to execute VSA? Or are we meeting the needs right now? And if not, what can the board do to support, I guess for you, Dr. Birdsong, what, is there anything that we can do to support that effort to fully staff, not only our in-person, but, our VSA programs as well?
I could bring some applications for teacher
Yes, I was gonna say.
certification. That would be the first step. It really is a matter of finding staffing. Like I noted in there, even just for the waiting list, we need about 74 sections covered for secondary. We are still in the hiring process for some of our courses that are currently running for VSA. We've had C&I coordinators and specialists. We've had ITRTs that are opening and covering courses, so we've been hiring out those. But we've been filling in the gaps for the students in the meantime until those are hired out.
And I imagine that there is a domino effect with that. So,
Can you
I-
specify domino effect? What do you mean by that?
well, I mean, if we have the specialists filling in for, kind of maybe doing double duty, and additional duties there, are we providing stipends or any other kind of support for those who are doing double duty?
So the ones, it's not really a double duty for
Not
them.
double,
Yeah,
I don't know what the
because-
terminology
Yeah, and
is, yeah.
because at the beginning of the year, they're not as quick to be in classrooms to let the teachers kind of settle into their routine. So they have plenty of work to do with curriculum development, assessment development, and data work, but they have just taken an hour and a half chunk of their day every other day to teach a class. So there hasn't been a stipend for them.
Okay.
And I think most of and Dr. Catala would know better, but I think most of the C&I folks, I think we only have one person, maybe two left that are still teaching a class, but I think we have folks in line to start taking those over. So I think by this week that everything is filled with Edmentum and others. Is that right, Dr. Cataldo?
Yeah, we've been working really hard with Edmentum, and so this week we should have all of our classes filled. Now, that's for the current BSA secondary, so we'd be fully staffed, ready, and having teachers there as opposed to having ITRTs or curriculum instruction folks doing it.
Okay,
So we're real happy with that.
And is Edmentum something like Virtual Virginia? Is it, can you, I'm not familiar with it.
I could tell you a little bit about it. Edmentum it's a similar structure. They really are a synchronous delivery model. So they have a synchronous person twice a week that provides instruction. Now, it's dependent upon the instructor's schedule. So sometimes a student may be in class, in another class during that time. So what they do is they record every single session. So it can be synchronous if you're in at the same time the teacher's instructing. And if you're not, it becomes asynchronous. But they do offer office hours throughout the whole entire week. So they can talk and work one-on-one with students.
That's
It's
good
a
to
really
hear.
neat model, and we've had a lot of great feedback from parents. Really happy about the rollout and how they communicated with them with emails. And actually, we're going to have an open house for Edmentum coming up too in the next couple weeks. So we're real happy with that.
Great. And oh, sorry.
I was going to ask, did you have more questions?
I do, but I
Okay,
can come
that's okay,
back.
go ahead.
Yeah. Oh,
Can I ask one associated with this? Thank you, Ms. Basing. How does the virtual scholars and the virtual Virginia impact the increase in enrollment? I know you mentioned some other things, Dr. Pohl, but I'm just wondering if our inclusion of this virtual arm of education is having some type of impact on our increase in enrollment, and how we can, if it is, how can we capitalize on that as a district moving forward?
And if I could provide some clarification, I don't know if you asked about K-12 or pre-K-12 enrollment, but I do believe that our enrollment continues to decline.
Oh, it is declining?
Yeah, I do believe it is declining.
Okay.
Just to be clear, and it
So
has
we're-
been over the last several years. And I think if I could give you an approximate number, as of last week, it was down around 440 some students. I don't think that was off from projection, but it is declining. Pre-K-12 is declining.
But overall, are we declining or increasing from last year?
Declining.
It's declining?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Ms. Basing.
oh, you're welcome. And I just had some, I also appreciate the information that you shared about the continuity of learning for students who are quarantining, which sounds like it's, depending on how many students are absent in a classroom, is largely asynchronous.
Right.
Unless a certain,
Yeah, if we get to the halfway mark in a classroom, then the teacher's paid to teach concurrently.
they get paid.
So
to
we
do-
add
okay.
that, we add a daily stipend to their pay for teaching concurrently so that we can make sure that we're offering the best possible for our students.
Okay, and the tutoring, though, is available for any student, though, who is in that class that might need that more
Absolutely.
direct
Right, and
support.
I think maybe you saw that we've also partnered with another company, FEV Tutor, that is, so at midnight, a student can dial up a tutor and have live tutoring with that platform as well. So we've really extended our tutoring opportunities for students as much as possible.
Okay, and two more quick. So around transportation, so are a majority of our students arriving to school on time? Are we seeing, I know the beginning of the school year is always a bit challenging, and I know this year especially. But is the on-time rate improving? And if not, are there any supports that the board may need to consider to help?
I think, I think we still see some challenges here and there on the on-time. I don't have the specific numbers. I will tell you the approval of having the extended staggers continue this year has made a huge difference on being able to be more on time. But it really depends on, if a driver might be sick, on if a student's late or not late coming to school. And we're doing everything we can to accommodate those students for learning as well. but I don't know that we have exact numbers on who's, how many runs have been late compared to last year at this point.
All right, and then last is around the ESSER spending. So I like how you broke out the survey questions and the priority areas from our stakeholders. And then the slide, I think it's 19, where it shows the spending plan breakdown of the required areas.
Right.
So social and emotional, as you know by now for me, is a really prominent area of concern, where I guess specifically, can you share what, other than, the SEL materials and
Absolutely.
things like that, what we are really providing to address, real mental health concerns of our students and our staff?
So, and let me break down further to the SEL that was in the specific grant. One is we're reviewing and purchasing curriculum that can tie in and support social emotional learning. There's a contract services for SEL professional development as well. There are SEL funds to support overtime pay for our family engagement specialists to be able to help out and reach out to families for needs. There's funds for creating before and after school program clubs for students to help them reconnect and interact more frequently. There's also a line item to provide overtime pay for psychologists, social workers, and counselors to work directly with student groups. So we're really doing everything we can to continue the relationship building, create that culture and climate of caring for our students, and bring them back to school in a way where they feel safe in the learning environment. But the specifics for SEL really will, they're tying into curriculum, but they're most importantly tying into being able to provide it after hours with some of the overtime pay, and the professional development with PBIS and other items that schools have been doing to incorporate it into the everyday routines for our students.
Any other questions, Mr. Jordan?
I guess first I will also say thank you as others have. Dr. Pohl, so in your presentation, you read off or described a lot of stuff. School board member who tries to keep up with stuff, it's hard for me to kind of take all that you shared in the time that you did and follow it all. And what I feel I'm experiencing as a school board member is hearing from parents and students, staff and others who are trying to find a way of taking all that information and just understanding it from a practical standpoint. And so I would still encourage that, even on the website, I think, having the health mitigation plan is fine. I don't know if the average person read it, how much they would make heads or tails of it. But I think if we could look at some frequently asked questions or expected questions and write things in ways so that as a school board member, when a constituent calls and has a concern or a question, of course, I will refer them to the administration, but I also think that if there's some way of saying, hey, I know this question has been asked and answered, here you can go to the website or whatever it is, I can send you a document, whatever the process is, so that families and others who I think are still trying to navigate the environment that we're in and with all the information and misinformation that's out there, what that looks like and what that can mean. So if there's some way, and I just think generally when we get these presentations to boil them down into some type of FAQ or something that allows for individuals who are at my level to be able to digest it, I think that would be very helpful. I wrote down several things, but I think I'm gonna try to work backwards from what I had written down. When we went through the ESSER planning, when we earlier in the year, we spent, I don't know, 30 meeting hours, if not more, talking about facilities and HVAC and so forth. In my opinion, I don't think we did much around having that same level of discussion around our continuous learning needs, so that that could then feed into our survey results, feed into the feedback that we would get, that would then feed into the plan. So, I had just worked on my own chart just by going to the state website. And what I did was pulled schools that we had under our school improvement essential actions and just did some data analysis. So we've reported, and I think we have it in this presentation or maybe coming up in the next presentation, that our math scores, we've talked about this as part of our goals and guardrails, but we know that Black students in math in Norfolk, on our SOLs, pandemic SOL testing, passed at 17%. And that's in comparison to 34 at the state, 52 Hampton, 41 Chesapeake, and so forth. When you start looking at individual school performance, we have some of our individual schools that were at 7, this is for all students, 7 for all students, 5, this is in math, for all students, 9 for all students, 7 for all students. As you look at scores like that, can you walk me backwards then how the ESSA funding, what we may have learned in terms of attendance, device, virtual learning, staffing, how is it the things that we are doing with our ESSA planning and with our update moving forward, how does it specifically address what we are seeing in terms of the academic data based upon the testing that was done, whether it was SOL stars and all the other things that we have looked at, so that we can get a sense that what we did well, we're building upon, where we had challenges, we are addressing, and not just in broad conversational strokes, but really some specifics around some of the students and some of the schools and some of the cohorts that clearly, at least based upon some of this data, shows that we need to do more than just what we always have done.
So, I'd like to point out first that the funding is not an equal formula by school, it's an equitable formula by school. So we look at data when we place the tutors that we have for literacy or middle school math and English. Every school doesn't get a set amount of hours. It's based on scores, it's based on data that those funds are placed. So that, because we know we have higher need areas, right? I think when you look at the data, what you just pointed out, Mr. Jordan, we have areas of high need. So we look at that when we allocate those, the human resources part that we were able to do within the grant, which is, providing additional tutors, providing additional hours for teachers to be able to do tutors, providing different tiered professional development at different levels of schools and different levels of needs. We are focusing specifically at every single school with the monthly data meetings to help drive this discussion as well about what are the specific needs. We cap those meetings off with what are your needs based off the data that we can support you with, and then we alter and change what we can alter and change to make sure we're supporting the needs. Additionally, this year we've put in specific softwares that give us more real-time data that teachers will be able to drive instruction around by using that as a resource. And one of the specific platforms that we're using actually ties right into Star Renaissance, and FEV Tutor ties into it as well. So when a student is getting tutoring, the FEV Tutor has access to their STAR data as well. So really connecting to the data down to the student level. The funds have allowed us to get software and supports and professional development that's needed, that's tiered by need at each school. And we're really personalizing that approach through these data meetings. with, the curriculum and instruction is represented, and it's live time response. The principal might say, we're seeing some issues with math already. I'd like to have math training on small group instruction. The C&I person is emailing the math team, and they're scheduling it right then. And that's all being able to be provided through the funds that we have here, because we're able to even pay teachers for after-school hours to do professional development. So it's not just another ask of a teacher, really supporting that need. So I think items like that is where you're really going to see the drive of the focus that we have on data at the school level with the school leadership, with a central support team that can make things happen for them, is what's going to really make some changes this year in our belief.
Yeah, well, and I think those are great things, and I don't know how to raise it at a board level that allows for us to get a sense of how those things are going. I'm a member of Dr. Lane's African American Superintendent African American Advisory Committee, whatever the official title is, and part of the discussions that have taken place there, at least part of my input, has been for many students, and far too many students, there's been a pandemic for 50 years. And that we have talked about some of these same things. So if you have a school, for example, that is dealing with disproportionate amount of substitutes, or have a disproportionate amount of teacher turnover, then while we talk about the good things of professional development and new software and so forth, I'm still not sure I get a good sense of how we are easing burdens that already existed based upon prior to the pandemic, and then now have been heightened as a result of the pandemic. And the reason why I was trying to advocate for us as a board to really take some time and talk about this as we were working on our ESSER funding and planning is so that we could take advantage of this one-time infusion of funding, so that 3 years from now we can demonstrate that we've set a new path, so that the next 50 years are ones of equity and growth, and not just the continuation of what we've had. So I still would like to encourage, moving forward, that we find a way as a board, I don't know if it's part of our goals monitoring, whatever it is, from time to time to try to do have the opportunity here, deeper dive, so that we can really see where implementation with fidelity leading to positive student outcomes will occur. Along those lines, with the ESSER funding, I had raised several times that the regulations or the language from the Department of Ed, U.S. Department of Ed, speaks to meaningful stakeholder input and involvement. And so while I appreciate the survey data, I got a survey. I think I filled one out twice. One, I was just trying to test it. And two, I tried to give feedback. I think I put mine in community member because I didn't see a category that would fit for me. But I don't think from the survey data you have any way of determining who's responding. So when we've been talking over the past year, you all have given us great data around zip code data or family data or school-based data and so forth. Is it fair to say that what we've collected with the survey doesn't allow for any additional disaggregation of who responded because we were unable to ask that information?
Correct, but we did ask what group do you, so when you read the requirements, there were specific groups that we wanted to make sure we had representation from. So there was the option of what group do you represent in your filling out of the survey, but there was not we did not have any kind of demographic information as a choice on the
Yeah, so
survey.
I still think that we should look for ways of trying to do additional surveys and see if we can do a capture of that for a couple of reasons. One, so that we can try to see what type of representative responses we're getting, because just as we were dealing with last year in terms of student attendance or engagement, we could find that we're making great improvements in terms of families that may have felt disconnected electronically before or no longer disconnected, or we could find that we still have those same gaps. Because if we do have those types of access or participation gaps, then our responses may not be truly reflective of what's being experienced out there. So I think that's very important also. On school supplies, so I think you mentioned that the school division purchased school supplies for all of our students. So when we have these ongoing school supply drives that are out there, community partners are raising money, doing school supply things and so forth. Is that the same thing that we're providing, the same thing that we're asking community partners to help provide for our students?
So in some instances, it may have been doubled up this year, and sometimes they just say bring supplies to the drive, and they put together backpacks. For the school supplies we purchased, we asked every principal to work with their teachers to say, what are they asking for? And we created a specific shopping list then, and we sent that list to principals to say, how many of each do you need? Here's your budget based on students. And they were able to purchase what their teachers were asking for them. So it had direct relation to what the teachers wanted.
Yeah, because I think if there's some way for us to, if the school division, based upon funds that we've received, feels that we are adequately addressing that need, then I think it would give an opportunity for community partners that want to do something additional for us to say, we don't have funding for this piece, and so that we can be strategic and not just ending up with a warehouse of school supplies, which would be a good thing. But I just think trying to make sure that we leverage our partnerships would be a good strategy to take. Pre-K enrollment. So where are we with our pre-K enrollment this school year versus where we were last year?
So Mr. Jordan, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I know that we did a lot of drives for pre-K from the spring through the summer, and I know we did a postcard mailing in the summer, and I think in the month of August, we had a 20% increase in enrollment. We're above where we were last year. I think our pre-K 4 enrollment is right around, I want to say, 1,200 to 1,250, but I don't have the numbers in front of me, so we're above where we were last year.
We're about 300 above. At least about last week, we were around 315 above where we were last year. And so we do plan to give a full update to the board during the next work session around
okay.
pre-K.
Okay, I thought it was today, I'm sorry. Okay. And are the students using, we were very good about getting devices to students and teachers. Are the students now using the devices, and the teachers are using devices as part of the in-person instruction as we thought we would, or are we still kind of in a transition phase of going from, hey, here are devices for you to do well when we were not in person. Now we're back in person, but we still are working on a transition so that the device really becomes a part of daily instruction.
So in most instances, those devices are being used, and there's still professional development. October 21st, I think the third Thursday for October, is a division-wide professional development that's focused on the software and the technology use in the classroom, because we were very clear that it was a change in instruction and not just, put the device away while you're in class. So the blended learning in that classroom is vital, so it is something that we're looking at and looking for.
Last question I have, going back to the ESSER funding again and the meaningful stakeholder input. So the federal government specifically encouraged consultation and collaboration with civil rights organizations and others. So when I asked the NAACP, when I asked different partners that I know have worked with Norfolk Public Schools if they were aware of our ESSA plan, if they had been invited to any discussions, many didn't know what I was talking about, and many said no. So can you describe what we will be doing moving forward to try to make sure that we are engaging in meaningful stakeholder participation beyond what we've just showed as far as responses to surveys?
So moving forward, we'll ensure that we can reach out to the leaders, whether it's a survey or a meeting that's done in the future, to make sure that they understand and they have input. We already have the spending plan posted, so any edits or changes that we're considering, as well as internally, we're going to develop a method where our internal stakeholders can say, hey, this is something I need, and they're thinking about it. So it's a direct link for them to give feedback right away. And we've considered doing that externally as well, to have a direct link that's live during the whole 6-month period, so that we can collect data the whole time and not just make it a one-time crunch as well.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Dr. Gabriel, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Number one, I'd like to thank the district for using the button that we have on the website so that parents can notify schools if they have a positive case. Number two, I'd like to personally thank all of our school nurses for the amazing job that they are doing. We have had not just only an influx of COVID-19 cases, but every other virus that you can imagine. They are having to deal with determining whether or not there is a direct exposure versus a child coming to school sick. So they have done an amazing job with dealing with the health of their school. And I received 2 phone calls actually from parents who said that the school nurse actually called their household to check on their child who was in quarantine just to see how they were doing, and they were so impressed by that. So to the nurses who are out there doing this amazing work, I say thank you, and your work is not going unnoticed. And I know that the principals also are participating in a lot of the contact tracing, and it's all hands on deck. I understand that. And so I thank the division for that, and I know that they're doing a hard job, a good job. I can support Mr. Jordan's request for an FAQ sheet. I think that as much as we can simplify the verbiage for parents and families, even if you want to put it on an elementary, a middle school, and a high school level, the easier we can get the information out so parents can have it in a quick and easy to read fashion is excellent. And I would link it to every school's website too, so that way they can have that information. Thank you for the update.
Gabriel, any other questions? Go ahead.
One that I forgot. Going back to the VSA for a moment, I'm also participating on the state's virtual education called Virtual Learning Advisory Committee, and part of what that group is working on is providing recommendations to the state and so forth on how Virginia can advance our virtual learning. So with the VSA, I know that as you described, coming out of last year, that it was application based. So that is still a limited. I know you described how it's still application-based, but you also are making opportunities as it can occur for others that may have special needs. But then I also think you identified that we were how many more teachers or individuals that you needed in order to fully meet the demand that's there?
Yeah, for the 370 on the wait list for secondary, there would be a need of 14 teachers or about 74 sections to be taught.
And
You take a technology section?
Yeah.
Mr. Jordan?
pardon me?
We got a
Can you take
CTE course for you.
Technology section?
Yes, are you volunteering to teach?
I thought y'all were
Need
paying.
you.
Well, I think too that to that point, I don't know all, what's involved with that. I do know that we have talked about, obviously, teacher shortages. We've talked about challenges with schools in challenging environments being able to get full-time teachers. Is there anything that we are seeing that some other school divisions who are running virtual programs and being able to meet some of the demand that they have, that they're doing differently, whether it's pay, whether it's, I don't know what it may be, that we could learn from? Are we finding that pretty much all school divisions that are offering this type of service is finding themselves in the same boat that we're in?
So Dr. Cataldo actually led a regional conversation around that as we were building VSA. And one of the things that we're doing in Norfolk that I don't think any other division is doing is a fully synchronous option for our students, which is really, that's been hard to find staff for, because we're trying to make it so students during school time, even if they're at home learning, are getting during school time like a regular type of schedule. So that has faced its own unique challenges. Divisions that have less challenges for staffing have a greater number of asynchronous courses. Because it's easier on the teacher, because then it's feedback and grading. I don't want to say easier, that's the wrong
I follow
language.
you.
It's a different modality though. So a teacher could go home, eat dinner, be with their family, then at 9 o'clock at night, they could be doing emails and giving feedback at that point instead of the live instruction model that we have in place. But we felt it was more beneficial for our students to have the live instructional model, which gave us, I think, a few more hurdles down the track.
But I'm sorry.
And in addition to that, Mr. Jordan, other divisions, when they gave their timeline in June, that was their timeline, period. There was no more extending, having a wait list, accommodating additional families. When they put out their June, July deadline, that was it. And they staffed based on that, and they have moved on. And as you can see, we've been very flexible working with our families because we believe that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I support that. I just also think that when you just look at some of our unique circumstances, well, hopefully unique circumstances in Norfolk, when you look at our vaccination rates, when you look at our infection rates, when you look at some challenges that we may have in terms of digital fluency and access gaps, that what I heard from many parents is they just didn't feel coming out of the end of last year into the summer that they fully grasped what was being mandated from the state in terms of in-person based upon the bill that was signed into law, and what it meant that in terms of what they need to do in order to be one of the chosen few. And so I still have a concern that we may have children who are out there that aren't in school because parents feel that there's a legitimate safety concern. And so I just hope, as part of the effort that you've described in terms of reaching out to those families, that if we know how many we're dealing with, that we just find a way. We just can't have children not doing anything. And I could just tell you, somebody who from time to time is throughout the city during the school day, I see some children and I know they're not in school. And I'm just bold enough to go up and ask them or ask their parents, why aren't they in school? But I just think that's something we need to keep our eye on.
Okay. Is that, you good, Mr. Jordan? Mr. Jordan, did you have more? Okay, Ms. Basine, you had your hand up? Out here.
What's that?
Close this out here.
Okay. I will try. So, I agree with Mr. Jordan in terms of, the students that may not be in the school building because of the safety concerns, and really trying to identify and figure out what we can do to support those families. But like Dr. Gabriel, I too wholeheartedly appreciate all the work our nurses are doing and our principals. And that reminded me of another question I had on my list here of our nursing staff. You know, are we fully staffed in all of our schools with a nurse?
I think we have 2 vacancies.
2 vacancies now?
I think so.
Okay.
So 5 employees, but 2 schools without a nurse right now.
2 schools without nurses.
Right.
And so what does supporting those schools look like right now?
We have a schedule. We're not going to leave a school without support. So Dr. Moore and Nurse Shelley Lewis is working closely with the nurses to provide coverage so that no school goes without support.
Okay. And I know just from, speaking with different individuals that it sounds like, just as we would expect, that there's a whole host of needs that our students are having beyond just COVID-related symptoms. And with that on top of, contact tracing, is there any other support that we might consider? I know Virginia Beach has put out, I guess, are recruiting contact tracers specifically that are, that will focus just on the contact tracing efforts, so their nurses can also focus on other student needs. Is that something that the administration has considered? And, is that something that we as a board might support so that we can take some of the burden off of our principals who should, can focus on instruction and on our nurses so that other health needs can be addressed?
Well, I do know through the VISTA program, which we are going to be a part of, we're allowed to hire staff. And so while I know many of the staff will be involved likely with testing efforts, there's some flexibility there. We certainly have not developed job descriptions around that yet because we haven't even signed an MOU, which we're still awaiting, and hopefully by the end of this week we'll have an MOU for the program. But we have some flexibility there. We know that there's a need. Our nurses are working extremely hard, as well as our building principals and our teachers. So we're going to do whatever we can to provide some additional support. So likely with that grant opportunity or with that opportunity, we'll be able to have some human resources that can physically help us do some of this work.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Pohl. Appreciate the presentation. Lots of information, good discussion. I would like to go on to our next item on our agenda. 5.02 Standards of Learning Results Update and Review of On-Time Graduation Data. Do you have a question?
Madam Chair, actually I have a request. We've got 3 reports. We spent about an hour on this last presentation. It's been a long day. I like to, don't really have to pose it as a motion, but I would like to limit discussion on each of these reports to a total time of 15 minutes. We've all had these and asked the staff members, I know they've done a lot of work on this, to kind of give us the Cliff Note version of this this information. It's been a long day. I don't want to zone out. It's a lot of good information, but we've all had these documents. But I think that we can kind of get our comments in about 15 minutes on each of these things and just be respectful.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't have to spend a lot of time presenting on it, just do a run through, but I do want to make sure that people are satisfied with their
I'm not really worried about the
questioning.
presentation, Madam Chair. I'm really about the discussion stuff. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest, I respect my colleagues, but some of these questions could have been in the form of an email.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Dr. Pohl.
Or I've been told before that there's a large forest and there's a lot of paths, but the direct path is the best path, and
Yes,
that's kind of
let's
what
do
I'm
that.
hearing right now. So, good afternoon again, Madam Chair, Dr. Martin, Vice Chair, Mr. Clanton, board members, and Dr. Birdsall. Tonight I will be presenting on SOLs, graduation rates, and chronic absenteeism. There we go. As you're aware, preliminary SOL results were shared with the board in July, and the following final results were nearly identical to what was already shared. It is of important note, this portion of the presentation on SOL data is not offering trend data or comparison data across the region, as the intended use of the data is to assess where NPS students were at the end of the year and to assist with the opening of school this year. This slide shows the final scores for the reading SOL outcomes by test, and the scores are presented by annual pass rate. And this is the graphical representation of that last slide.
Dr. Pohl, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Can you please talk about why we don't have trend data? Just, I know it's been talked about a lot, but I think it's important to mention right now.
Absolutely. So the recommendation for last year's SOL results are not to compare them to previous years because it was unlike anything else. The recommendations was to use the data and the student detail by question report to guide our instructional practice as we open this year, and not to look at these as comparable results across our region or against ourselves or across schools or anything else. It's the data that we're concerned about and that we're looking at, and that's what we are doing. In fact, as presented earlier, we actually gave every teacher this year their current this year's students SDBQs from last year. So teachers didn't have to go through and research and find it. We made the packets for every single teacher so they had that detailed report in their hands before school started.
Thank you.
My pleasure. So here are the mathematic outcomes, and this slide has the only 3 differences that we saw from the preliminary data. In the July data had grade 6 at 19%, where you can see here it is at 16%, had grade 7 at 24%, and here it's at 11%, and it had grade 8 at 24%, where here it's at 19%. The error occurred from too many tests being pulled from our data internally that created a higher result, and this calculation has been corrected within the internal calculations. And then again, just because I like to see it graphical as well, here's the graphical representation of the data. And then we have the same information laid out for our science tests and our science test graph. Please note that writing and history are not included since the VDOE is not reporting scores publicly. This is the case since multiple options for writing and multiple options for history were offered as far as performance assessment-based tests in lieu of the standard SOL test, and it created a very small number of testers. As we, that's odd. There we go. As we prepare for data this year and beyond, there are a few updates on the SOLs that I'd like to share with you. The information on this slide was shared in July. However, it's officially been voted on by the Virginia Board of Education and is now in effect. So it talks about our 3-year average, the comparison years, and the results from 2019, 2020, 2021 won't be considered. And the growth calculations are now based off the growth assessment, and the CCCRI accreditation measure has been moved from the class of 22 to the class of 23. Growth will now be determined using the growth assessments rather than an arbitrary table. For this year, the growth assessment is being given in the fall, and the outcomes are to be used to support the identification of unfinished learning. Next year and beyond, there will be an added winter assessment that will assist with identifying progress in the current year in the winter administration. The formative information for the beginning of the school year and mid-year assessments will help identify student needs to assist them with being successful on the end-of-year assessment and is being phased in over 2 years. And for an accreditation comparison, the growth assessments will establish a baseline for growth when compared from the fall growth assessment to the spring SOL test, and will be included in the combined rate for accreditation. The focus of the new system is on acceleration and not remediation to keep students on track for learning all standards within the year. The growth assessments will be scored using a vertical scale score. This allows for growth monitoring to be across tests and across grade levels and across years. It will also allow for student growth measures to be incorporated into the accreditation. The scores for the fall and winter assessments are not on a pass-fail scoring measure. They are vertical scale scores simply for growth. As seen on this slide, if a student in 3rd grade scores a 1,401, they would have a basic understanding of the previous year's content for the fall assessment, while a 4th grade student would have a minimal understanding of the previous year's content and need significant supports and scaffolding built into instruction. At the top, if a student scored 1551 in grade 7, they would be considered to have a good understanding of the previous year's content, where a grade 8 student would be considered to have a basic understanding of the previous year's content, but would still need some supports and scaffolding to be built into the instruction. This slide gives an example of how the combined rate is calculated to include the growth measures. Within the image on the right, if a 6th grade English class of 10 students had 6 students meet the benchmark score and pass the test, you see the 6 green figures up there, and they had 1 student that did not pass but showed growth, the green figure that's circled, as well as 1 EL student who demonstrated growth due to progress in the Access for ELS 2.0 assessment, the combined rate for accreditation would be an 80% for that class versus the 60% pass rate. The growth rates are a part of the accreditation for grades 3 through 8 math and English. And of course, math does not include the English learner progress because that's only in the English reading score. The growth opportunity ensures a student needs are being met over time. If a student shows growth in year 1, data from the assessments can be used to target gaps in understanding to be authentically addressed. If the same student continues to show growth in year 2, there is evidence of a higher level of understanding and the student has a better opportunity to meet that proficiency mark in year 3. The student performs better each year with a focus on gained skills and understandings based on growth. This way, the student authentically reaches a proficient score without the need for simply taking test-taking strategies. There is an internal report that we are creating that will track the student's growth to proficiency over time so that we can look at that new data point as well. Each of the new growth assessments will generate a student detail by question report or an SDBQ for parents and teachers, and the VDOE stresses that teachers, principals, and division leaders should not overanalyze or depend on the vertical scale score, but place an emphasis on the SDBQ. These reports will be provided to the schools, parents or guardians, and teachers following each test. And next, we're going to roll into graduation updates. Graduates are defined as students who earn an advanced studies diploma, standard diploma, modified standard diploma, or applied studies diploma. On-time graduates are students who earn one of these 3 diplomas within 4 years of entering the 9th grade. Students with disabilities and English learners who have plans in place that allow them more time to graduate are counted as on-time graduates or as non-graduates when they earn the diploma or otherwise exit high school. The top row of this chart represents when students entered 9th grade for the first time, and the second row is their cohort year or their supposed graduation year. Next is the NPS on-time graduation rate and then the state rate. As seen on this slide, the NPS rate dropped by 1% last year. However, the rate is 5% higher than 5 years ago. This graph represents all diploma types earned by students in the 2021 cohort by number below the key and percentage within the graph. Therefore, 859 students, or 55% of the graduates, earned a standard diploma, 619, or 40%, in advanced diploma, 33, or 2%, in IB diploma, 39, or 3%, in applied studies, and 36%, or 2%, completed the high school equivalency. This graph represents the breakdown of diploma type by category. For example, 22% of Asian students earned a standard diploma, 63% of Asian students earned an advanced studies diploma, 2% in applied studies, and 12% in IB. Again, the number of students within each category is listed below the key. And this graph represents the breakdown of each diploma type by race or ethnicity. As an example, of the 859 standard diplomas, 1% were received by Asian students, 68% by Black students, 8% by Hispanic students, 6% by multiracial, and 16% by white students. This graph illustrates the students in a specialty group who earned diplomas on the distribution of types of diplomas earned. Of the 110 students with disabilities that graduated, 5% earned an advanced diploma, 59% a standard, 35% earned an applied studies, and 5% earned their high school equivalency. And this chart shows a comparison of on-time graduation rates within other divisions in the region with Richmond and the state. And last but not least, chronic absenteeism. As a reminder, K-12 students who are enrolled in a school for 50% or more of the school year who are absent more than 10% of the days enrolled are considered chronically absent. Therefore, if a student was enrolled for 180 days, if they missed more than 18 days, they're chronically absent. If they're enrolled for 100 days, that mark is 10 days. Last year, 16.6%, or 4,375 of NPS students were considered chronically absent. And this graph shows the percentage of students chronically absent in each group. Again, the all students was 16.6%. In the race ethnicity group, 4.5% of Asians were chronically absent, 20.4% of Black students were chronically absent, 16.4% of Hispanic students, 8.1% of white students, and 13.5% of multiracial students were chronically absent. Then 19.1% of students with disabilities, 22.1% students from economically disadvantaged homes, and 18.8% of English learners were absent. However, I think one of the true pieces of data to look at is here. And this graph shows a breakdown of the percentage of chronically absent students by group. Therefore, in the second grouping, of the chronically absent students, 0.5% were Asian, 72% were Black, 11.6% were Hispanic, 10% were white, and 5.4% were multiracial. And then the last end of the graph shows the breakdown of 16.8% were students with disabilities, 85.6% came from economically disadvantaged homes, and 5.4% were English learners. As a reminder, the students may fall into multiple categories in that third section, and when the data is shown this way, it allows us to see disparities between student groups. And this concludes the review of the SOL and graduation data. At this time, we stand ready for questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Poole.
My pleasure.
Any questions for Dr. Poole? Mr. Clanton and then Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Dr. Poole, for the information. Just going back to that last slide, I guess that was page 26, and when we see 72% African American, well, Black students and 85% economically disadvantaged, can you just elaborate on particular strategies that the division is employing right now to address those particular target groups?
So we added, I believe it was 9, I have another sheet. I believe we added 9 attendance technicians this year. We have a total of 15 attendance technicians now to help with our attendance across the board. And I think that is one of the major players that we'll see a difference in, because those work across schools to help out with outreach. We've also added, through some of the ESSER funding, some additional pay for our family engagement specialists to be able to reach out and work with the families to get their students to be coming to school or logging into school. And we also added the 2 EL engagement specialists specifically for English learners to help with that as well.
Follow up to that one, Dr. Poole. When you talk about the attendance technicians, how many schools are they assigned to, typically on average?
Digging deeper than what I have, Mr. Clanton, I'd have to find that out for you. I do apologize. I know they work division-wide, so I'm not sure exactly how many schools each have. It's also based on needs-based. So if you have low chronically absenteeism numbers, you're not going to have as much time with the attendance technician. But I don't have exactly what schools they're assigned to.
It's the secondary schools, and some of them are also assigned to an elementary, but their work is primarily at the secondary level, because that's where we have the major issues at secondary.
I'm asking because I'm wondering, as we started to look at developing our budget and so forth, whether or not that's a particular area that we may need to identify additional funding to secure additional individuals to support.
I asked for additional ones last year because I knew this would be an issue this year.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll wait for that recommendation when the time comes. Mr. Jordan and then Ms. Basine.
Trying to find, I think it's slide 19.
Go ahead.
Diplomas earned by student race and ethnicity, I think is what I had.
Was it the graduation?
Yeah, it shows the diploma, cohort diplomas earned. Yeah, that slide. Is that the right one? Can you go to the one that says by student race and ethnicity? So, and this is really for those of us from the conversation we were having earlier today around our goals and guardrails. So on this chart, you remember we were having a conversation, I guess, around one of the guardrails dealing with systemic racism, and there was a discussion around, I guess, dual enrollment, advanced diplomas, and so forth.
And/or dual
And/or dual enrollment. So on this chart, if you look at the standard diploma by this cohort, so it shows those earning standard diplomas. Looks like African Americans are at 53%, Hispanic 58%. When you go over to the advanced studies diploma, you see that Asians are at 63%, blacks at 27%, whites at 51%, and so forth. So what I was trying to raise into the conversation that we were having earlier today, and I think we had at previous meetings, if you do ands of these, then I think it can cloud what we're looking at versus if you look at this, how this chart shows it by each specific category. And so I think in our ongoing progress monitoring, as we consider how we, or as the administration is looking at interim measures, I just think this chart gives a good representation of why I think we should look at it by category and not end them all. So I wanted to bring that forward. And then
Actually, Mr. Jordan, in order for us to come up with an average, we're gonna have to look at them individually anyway. I mean,
Right.
we will have to disaggregate it by IB, dual enrollment, honors, AP. We're gonna have to look at all of those areas differently anyway to get a combined data point for review. So we're gonna do that.
right. Now, I just think from the, as we were just looking at it from progress monitor, I just wanted to try to tie it to the conversation we had earlier. And then my other question is on the graduating cohorts comparison to other divisions. Is there a reason that we just picked Richmond outside of our region and not other? I mean, what was it about Richmond? Because it's a large urban school division. Is that why we chose Richmond?
I believe so, and I was informed we traditionally have compared to Richmond as well.
Yeah, I think we've often looked at Richmond, Roanoke. Sometimes we've thrown in Petersburg. It's small, but I didn't know what the rationale was for on this particular case. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, Ms. Basine?
So along the similar lines, looking even at the school-by-school data, just, if you all haven't had a chance as yet to look at the school-by-school data, I think it really speaks to why in our goals that, that we're focusing on special populations, not that the needs assessment that we received obviously spoke to that, but, just even our most recent data speaks to it as well. So along those lines, and I think I've said this before, and others have as well, we're often presented with strategies and resources that are being used to accelerate the learning. And in this case, and this year, the gaps that existed are even more stark. So can you tell us a little bit about what innovation, what is really you think different this time that we haven't really harnessed before, and what, I guess, and how are we monitoring how those strategies are working to produce the outcomes that we want?
So I think it goes back, again, to some of the software we were able to purchase this year that gives us more real-time data. We've transitioned to having division-wide common unit assessments. So we have more incremental data for the teacher to be able to use and for us to be able to focus on. We're at the schools every month, our highest need schools, every month we're at the table with a principal. There's a CNI member, someone from special education, there's someone from school leadership. and other areas of need. If they have a high EL population, we'll bring an EL person there as well, focusing on that data and then talking with the principal about needs and making sure they understand their data set and that we can support that. And then the quarterly meetings for our schools under watch, we actually add walkthroughs on that as well. So we're in the classrooms with the school leaders talking about instruction. I think like a focus we haven't had in the recent past at least. And I truly believe that discussion and focus on real-time data with the principal and supporting their needs is going to drive a lot of change in our division, because we also right now have the financial supports through the grants to add extra tutoring, to give them extra tutors during the day that are like the tutors that we've talked about are staffed at the schools. Principals are actually hiring the tutors. They're there during the day to help out in the needed areas. And those are things we haven't had in place because we just haven't had the ability. And those are going to be some of the big game changers in a lot of our opinion.
Thank you for that. And then on slide 10, you kind of described, how the assessments will be used, going forward. So with this year, with the many disruptions that we expect to have, since we are very much still in a pandemic, and there's going to be disruptions to learning continuity, are you, as the state, already having discussions about, so this year accreditation is still, there has been no decision about that?
The decision right now is that schools will have accreditations. We will have to meet the levels for accreditation this year. But I'm sorry, there are so many little click points in this slide. I'm trying to get back to the.
And yeah.
1, 2.
Well, I mean, and I know they decided that, but is there pushback, I guess, to that because of the level of disruption that?
So I think the state has really considered that, and that's why they changed these, and the VDOE board voted on them. So if you look at that, we're looking, our 3-year average data, which is a way to make accreditation as well, is 17, 18, 18, 19, 21, 22. We're taking the 20 and the 21 data out of the mix. So those aren't even a part of the conversation anymore. The comparison years, so if we're looking from year to year, we're looking from the 18-19 data, which was the last full year, to the 21-22 school year data. So they've kind of taken the COVID timeframe out of any of the data use. So it really kind of levels the playing field a little bit more. And the growth calculations with the new growth assessment, for accreditation purposes, that's the VDOE used to make a static table for growth. So if in grade 3 you scored a 340, in grade 4 you scored a 360, you made the growth. Here it's actually assessment based from an assessment in the fall to the SOL test, so it's going to be a better measure of growth student to student instead of a static table. So I think with what the VDOE's put in place, they've put some kind of safeguards in place to that. But my understanding is right now, and I don't know that I've heard anything different, that we're full speed ahead. And we're taking SOL tests in the spring, and they are going to count towards accreditation for this school year.
The count toward accreditation is what I was really asking about, not just the test. But yeah, I just wanted to better understand how, just because we are very much still in a pandemic where our student learning is going to be disrupted, and that's not to say that we now have, I think, strategies and innovative strategies in place that we know we can use, where we're in a very different place than we were when this started, but at the same time, disruption's still happening, and with our staff too. So
I'm really excited about how this has come around today with our all-day discussion with our governance training, and really focusing on academic, learning to clear our plates a bit so we can focus solely on almost solely on academic, improving academic outcomes for our students, and providing their supports we can to our teachers and staff, and then this real approach you've taken with data, and to be able to individualize the interventions in real time. I think that I'm really excited for the work that's the foundations that we're laying now, and I'm really excited to to see how this, obviously all for the better of our students, but really excited to celebrate some of these revelations and just to become, always improve. We're an education institution, and we're committed to learning in every way we can, and especially to help our students. So I'm really excited about this. No magic bullet. We all have to do the hard work, right?
Right.
We all
Every day.
do. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Pohl, once again.
Dr. Martin,
Yes.
I do apologize, but unfortunately, I will have to excuse myself from the meeting. I would like to have it noted in the minutes that I know that we did move item 5.01, the COVID vaccination vote that will take place, the resolution. I would like for it to be noted that I am in full support of the resolution, even though I will not be able to be here for the vote.
Okay.
Thank you.
What we could do right now, since you're going to leave anyway, is I'd like to, without opposition, to amend the agenda to put 5.05 at 5.0, above 5.03, so it becomes 5.03.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, can I get we need to read the resolution. So, should Jack read it? Do you have a copy? No.
Testing, there we go.
Loud and clear.
A resolution of the School Board of the City of Norfolk, Virginia, a resolution mandating that school board employees be vaccinated for COVID-19 or submit to weekly testing for COVID with exemptions based on disability or sincerely held religious beliefs. Whereas the COVID-19 pandemic continues, multiple variants of the original genetic form of the virus have now evolved, and infections from the new Delta variant, which causes more infections and spreads faster than the original version of the COVID-19 virus, are surging within the United States, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and the City of Norfolk. And whereas the School Board of the City of Norfolk has the ultimate authority and responsibility under the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia and the Commonwealth's laws to supervise the public schools within the City of Norfolk, to determine the government to be employed within those schools, and in general to guarantee the safety, efficient, and successful operation of those schools. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the School Board of the City of Norfolk. Section 1, that the school board hereby mandates that beginning no later than January 3rd, 2022, all school board employees shall be required to be fully vaccinated for COVID-19, while permitting current employees who decline to be fully vaccinated to choose to submit to weekly COVID-19 testing results in order to maintain their employment, and with the provision of exemptions to employees who are unable to undergo vaccination or testing for legally valid reasons based on disability or sincerely held religious beliefs. Section 2, that the superintendent is hereby authorized and directed to do all things necessary to bring about this mandate, including but not limited to requiring all school board employees to execute a survey indicating whether they are vaccinated, and if vaccinated, providing proof of vaccination as demonstrated by a copy of a personal vaccination card or other confirmation from the Virginia Department of Health or other agency which can certify proof of vaccination, setting a date by which all employees must be vaccinated or, if they choose to do so, begin submitting weekly COVID-19 testing results, establishing procedures for the submission of weekly COVID-19 testing results for employees refusing vaccination, establishing forms and a process for employees to submit claims for exemptions with documentation supporting their claims, and establishing a process of warnings and discipline for those employees who do not have a legally valid claim for an exemption but refuse to be vaccinated and subsequently refuse to submit to weekly COVID-19 testing results. Section 3, that the superintendent shall, as she develops the particulars for accomplishing this mandate, bring them before the board for public information, discussion, and, when legally necessary, additional board action amending this resolution. Section 4, that the board may amend this resolution at any time without prior notice to the general public or board employees beyond that required by the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3700 et sec. Of the Code of Virginia in 1950 as amended. And finally, Section 5, that this resolution, as amended, shall be effective from and after its adoption and shall continue in effect until such time as the board votes to repeal it.
Thank you, Mr. Cloud. Now, Ms. Tanner, I'm
Madam
sorry.
Chair.
Can I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Madam Chair, I move for the adoption of the resolution.
Second.
And Dr. Gabriel is second. Any discussion? Okay. Ms. Tanner, please call the roll for vote.
Basine?
Aye.
Campson?
Aye.
Clanton?
Aye.
Gabriel?
Aye.
Jordan?
I was going to signal for discussion, but I just wanted to, I think at the conclusion of this, it might be good just to explain that this is an initial effort on behalf of the board and that there'll be subsequent information coming forward so that it's understood what we're doing beyond
We're
the
doing that.
technical language. I vote aye.
Thank you.
Smith?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye. Okay. The ayes have it. The resolution passes. We look forward to a presentation at next month's meeting from Dr. Birdsong and her team. All right, great. Get my computer up again. Okay, so next on the agenda, we have the review of the annual Norfolk Public Schools Equity Report.
All right, good evening again, everybody.
Our star presenter today. Thank you,
You guys
Dr.
are tired
Ball.
of hearing my voice by now, I'm sure.
No, no.
This afternoon, again, I'll be presenting on the annual equity report that's included in policy DAB with a focus on equity. The presentation will focus on the policy requirements, an overview of division-level data, a comparison of information to the last equity report presented to the board, and information on how the school-level reports are formatted. Norfolk Public Schools Policy on Equity, DAB, has a requirement for an annual equity report to the board that includes the following: student enrollment at each school, disaggregated by race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, English language learners, special education, and gifted students, or identified gifted. Student average daily attendance for data for each school. Student achievement data at each school, disaggregated by race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, English learner status, special education, and identified gifted. Student suspension discipline data for each school, the amount of federal funding allocated to each school, the annual funding allocated outside of federal funding to each school, the number of highly qualified teachers at each school as identified by the Virginia Department of Education, the number of highly effective teachers, the experience level of teachers at each school, and the teacher retention rate for each school. The enrollment data provided for the 3 years is from the fall state report, and it includes pre-kindergarten and post-grad. Since this report does not include gifted students as part of the demographic report, the number has been internally calculated. As seen on this slide, the enrollment has been declining over the past 3 years. While the racial breakdown has remained consistent, the percentages for students with disabilities declined last year, and students in economically disadvantaged households increased. This slide contains data on student attendance averages for 3 years. Although attendance rates were higher last year for all reporting categories, due to virtual classes, the majority of the year students had an alternative ways to be counted as present other than being in a school classroom. As the student achievement data has been presented to the board for STAR, PALS, and now for SOLs, the next few slides are an overview of what data is included in the report. English reading SOL data is provided at all levels for the division report. All of the SOL data is from the annual pass rates reported by the VDOE. Since the SOL reports from the VDOE do not include gifted students as a group of this data set has been locally calculated. It also has the mathematics SOL data provided at all levels, the science data provided at all levels. PALS data is provided for kindergarten and grade 1, as grade 2 is included in STAR, so it is not in the PALS data. STAR data for mathematics is grades 2 through 8, and STAR reading is grades 2 through 8. Then we also have grade level promotion that's reported for all grade levels on the division report. This is reported by the number of students and the percentage of students in each group. In reviewing the promotion data, grades 9 and 10 have the lowest rates, and they're the only rates below 80% of the students matriculating to the next level. The next data set being reported is the annual student discipline data. The numbers are the number of incidents, and the percentages are the percentage of that group that received discipline. The division data for in-school suspensions is low for the 2021 school year, as the majority of the year was virtual. Short-term suspensions are out-of-school suspensions less than 10 days, and again, the numbers for last year are small due to the limited number of in-person school days. The final part of the discipline data is on the long-term suspensions, which included none for last year. This slide has an overview of the annual budget details for operating and grant funds over the past 3 years. The funds include textbook funds, but not capital improvement project funding. And the final pieces of data relate to teacher data. The highly qualified data is from the state's IPAL report, and the highly effective teacher data includes any teacher that's not on a plan for growth or a performance improvement plan. The teacher experience data is pulled from Munis, which has a rolling system in such a way you cannot get a snapshot of data to calculate it, and it wasn't taken previously. Therefore, there is no data prior to last year. From this year forward, this data will be calculated at the end of each year for inclusion on this report. And the data is reported in bands from 0 to 3 years, 4 to 10 years, 11 to 20 years, and 21 plus years of consecutive years of employment with Norfolk Public Schools. And the final piece of data relates to teacher retention, which is the percent of classroom and non-classroom teachers who remain employed through June 30th of the given year. So in comparison to the last equity report that we have that is from 2018, the current one does not include staffing by FTE positions, a funding breakdown by program code, a pupil to teacher ratio, the building capacity or the number of portable classrooms, or the enrollment by grade level. However, this equity report does include attendance data by demographics. It includes discipline data by demographics and SOL data by demographics, which the previous report did not. And this report also has the addition of STAR, PALS, and promotion data, which is also by demographics as a part of the academics, which the previous report did not. And this includes gifted breakout for data for enrollment, attendance, and student achievement, which was not included previously. This has highly qualified teachers based on VDOE's data, and teacher experience and teacher retention. All of the additions to this equity report are inclusive of what is outlined in policy DAB. And the individual school reports are laid out identically to the division report with a side-by-side comparison of the division data and the school data, so it's easier to make comparisons. Additionally, I'd like to point out that the school reports are being given to every principal, and they're reviewed as a part of the data meetings at the schools to help keep the focus centered on equity. Thank you for your time for me to present this information, and stand ready for questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Pohl. Go ahead, Ms. Campson.
I'd like to just take a minute to express my amazement at the amount of data that you and your team have put together for us tonight. When I was looking at at the charts and all earlier yesterday, so I could see what was there and what I would like to know, I really have to say it was so thorough that it was hard for me to come up with little questions for you. It's that I mean, I don't know what other data I would ask for almost. I'm sure eventually, as I start getting into something will come across that I'll say, gee, I wish I'd had this. But this is really amazing. I know I had to do some of these things and put them together when I was interim in your role. I wouldn't want to be in a contest against you and your team, because this isn't something that's done by one person. This is a real team effort, and I'm just wanted to express my thanks for how complete the information is, and also to the way you compressed it and moved us along a little bit, since it's been 10 hours now. So thank you all, everyone on the team, and all those people that are already gone that are not here, but thank you so much.
I appreciate
great,
that.
Great job.
I'd be remiss to, the ARA, the CNI folks, I mean, the school leadership folks, and all of tonight's work, it was a cross-division effort.
It would have to be.
It was just organized and put into PowerPoint to try to give you a streamlined approach to it. So I appreciate that feedback.
Very impressive. Thank you.
I just have one recommendation, is on this 298-page report of data, table of contents maybe moving forward, but that's, neither here nor there, but it's a lot.
It is a lot. You're absolutely correct.
But, some way of navigating, I mean, if it's going to be digital, it might be, easier to do like a click.
And I think what we could do for that digitally is in the future, a little bit more time with it. I can make it a clickable, so you can go school to school. Just didn't have the time to get that done,
Yeah,
but
that's
that's an
fine.
improvement I could break down.
Already.
First time we've received this report, so, I mean, this is very impressive. Thank you. Any questions, anyone else? Oh, sorry, Ms. Dean, go ahead.
Yeah, first, I agree with my colleagues. I appreciate aligning this equity report with our equity policy. Just a couple questions on slide 19. The data that's not included, that, talk a little bit about the data not included.
So since this hasn't been presented to the board for 3 years, we really went and focused on the equity policy to outline exactly what the annual report's supposed to have, and those were not items within the policy for the equity report. And that's why they just weren't included, because we just went bullet by bullet and created this equity report based on policy.
Okay. All right. I figured that was probably why. But I guess to all of us, I mean, I think now we are all charged with, we have the data. The data is telling us something, and it's been pretty consistent. And, we have to act on this. And so, I look forward to further conversations as we talk about how we can support the administration and our school division in ensuring that equity is, pervasive throughout all of our actions from the top down, and, that we're here to support that.
Go ahead, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you. I want to go back to the chart on teacher experience. Can't remember what slide that was.
Gotcha. Right there.
What slide number is that? Can you tell?
I think it's eight, maybe 18.
Yes. So can you explain to me what you were saying in terms of information we were unable to capture in the previous years?
Yeah, absolutely. So in working with human resources and the amount of experience, that we can get a snapshot from our system now of our current teachers of how much experience they have, but we can't go back to 1920 and say how much experience did the teachers we had in 1920 have, is what I was informed in pulling the data. And that data hadn't been pulled for a report, so that they didn't have the numbers to provide. It's because the way it was explained to me is it's like a live snapshot of data that they pull. And I can't.
Yeah. I just have a concern about that. If there's something in our data infrastructure that we need to provide in order to allow these things to occur. I think we should identify it. I think pandemic funds would support it. And long before you, this is just something that has been said year after year after year. And so we've had conversation in the past around, what type of supports do we need to give to our technology infrastructure that allows for the data reporting not only here, but ultimately being able to port it to the website and other things so that anybody can see the transparent data. This particular one is concerning to me because when we were having the discussions around step increases and so forth, I'm just have a concern that there's still, for me, seems to be some disconnect between what we're able to pull out of our human resources data systems. And I would hope that, Dr. Birdsong, if there's some way to go back and revisit and really just kind of get a sense of what's needed so that we can try to do trends beyond just the 2021 year. The other...
Mr. Rooney, if I may interject real briefly, I think you'll be pleased to know we just completed an RFP for a new data warehouse to do just that work, to be able to ingest the data and to be able to build reports. And again, that was some of the ESSER funding we were able to use because the focus that we really want to have on data. So we are working on that issue.
Hallelujah, and thank you for that one.
Absolutely.
On highly effective, we kind of touched on this earlier today as well. I have concerns about the definition. I think I have concerns, largely because based upon the definition that we have, I'm not sure I follow if it says that teachers are not on a plan for growth or formal performance improvement plan. So that determination is part of the teacher evaluation process.
Correct.
So the reason why in the original equity policy and also in the board's accountability plan, we kind of left that open, was to try to come back and have a discussion around how do we in Norfolk really determine what highly effective is. And I'm not sure, I have no expertise in this, but I'm not sure that that the definition that we're using based upon the percentages that it's giving is really getting us down to what I think we may need. So I just want to put a asterisk there for us to give that some more thought around what our definition is of highly effective. I just want to put an asterisk there for further consideration. And that's it for now. Thank you for the report. I hope that we can get to the point where we can have scorecards and other things that really allows for us to delve into it some more, but I appreciate the work that's been done.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jordan. Go ahead, Ms. Basine.
So to that end, with the scorecards, will each school site also have, like their equity report attached so that, stakeholders of a particular school or whatever, they can easily access the equity scorecard or their schools,
So we have not done that yet, and one of the things I need to look at the data when we separate it that way is to make sure our ends, I want to go through it a little bit more thoroughly to make sure they won't have any ends that are too small, because then they become identifiable.
Well, right, yeah, that I understand. Yeah.
But, again, I want to state that it is going to be a large portion of the data conversations that we have at the schools.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, going back to the policy for a moment. So, the policy was calling for this stakeholder task force. I always felt it was way too big for what just hard to manage. We initially modeled this after Roanoke's policy, and it was much smaller and board focused. I know Roanoke has now changed their policy. But I think going back to the conversations we were having earlier about meaningful stakeholder participation, and also some of the goals and guardrails that we were talking about in terms of getting folks involved, I think this is a great opportunity to bring those voices to the table and really have an understanding of what the data is saying school by school and division-wide, and getting these additional voices at the table to help inform not just getting the data, but what is it telling us, and what does it mean to the stakeholders who are seeing it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'm sure you're not going very far.
No, but this one will be quick and easy, I promise.
Okay, all right. Wonderful. We've made a lot of progress today. I'm really proud of this group. Okay. So next we have the policy discussion on policy GCBDZ, employee leave.
So, Madam Chair, Dr. Martin, Vice Chair Clanton, members of the board, and Dr. Birdsong, as you know, when we have a first and second reading policy, we post these on our site, and we send out information to our employee groups for feedback. We have received a couple items of feedback on these policies that we are recommending that we bring them back to administration around the feedback and then bring it back to policy committee. So at this point, I recommend that we pull this from next week's agenda for vote, and that we have a chance to revisit a couple of the pieces of information. Mr. Billups and his team are already looking at it, so that we can then bring this back hopefully by November to the board again with some of those suggestions and recommendations in the policy.
Thank you. I appreciate the responsiveness.
Absolutely.
That's great. Okay. Any comments or anyone opposition to this? All right, great. And so you said for the November meeting. We'd have to go through two more. We did two readings of this?
When we discuss it in the school policy review committee, in the PRC, then we'll talk about if we need it first or second again, based on those changes.
I look forward to that recommendation.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, everyone, I don't want to belabor this. We've had a really long day. And again, I appreciate everyone's participation and showing up, and I'm super excited about all of the remarkable things we discussed today. So with that, please drive home safely, and the meeting is adjourned.